service providers, and then they will be able to utilize the funds. But he didn't come to hear me talk. He came to listen to Mr. Nathan. So, brother,
this is great.
Come on up.
Thanks very much, Brian. Appreciate it, man. And any chance I get to come home, I take it. My goodness, it's fun to see y'all. How are you doing?
Good.
Tell your mom and dad I said hi.
Yeah.
This is great. Man. Well, man. All right. I'll just start, because I could go ad nauseum. God cursed me by allowing me to be a recovering politician and a preacher. And so it's one of those things where you can just go for a while. And you can almost pick any subject. I kid you not. And we could go at it for a little bit. And so I'll try to keep my comments in such a way where you guys can ask questions. Because really what I want tonight is for this to be a Q&A. I just shared this, some of the staff and team will hear some things that I've already said before, so forgive me for my redundancy there. But when we talk about education savings accounts, when we talk about the value, I'm actually going to pull something out here, the value of what we're trying to accomplish in the state of Wyoming. God has opened the door for Wyoming Family Alliance as He has continued to expand our team. And I don't know, I don't have a whole bunch of these here with me today, but we have page after page of our team members, and we just introduced several more of them who are not in this book. And one of them, Sarah Bieber, who helped launch the Moms for Liberty group in the state, is now our, we call her the DIRD, the Director of Educational Resource Development. But it's actually to try to provide something that will counterbalance the Wyoming School Boards Association and the Wyoming Education Association. And so it's part of a long-term plan that I call my five-fold vision for the state of Wyoming. And so all of these things tie together. We're focusing tonight on education. Because I'll say this, when it comes to looking for revitalization in Wyoming's families, or what we as Christians call revival, in Wyoming's families, such a thing is difficult to achieve if your child is being taught another religion called secularism. And that forced secularism, the French call laicity, or forced laity, it's to try to secularize society. And that's how you can have an Olympics program where you have a bunch of transgender individuals trying to recreate The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. And so you get this madness that the world is finally saying, that's weird. And you ask, how did we get here? Because future historians are going to look back at this age as a moment of madness. And the only way to achieve such a madness is to have been educated to that level of nonsense. And that's why we are where we are. And the same thing is true in the state of Wyoming. We are no different than Manhattan, or very little different. We have a certain cultural value. I happen to be listening to Hillbilly Elegy right now by J.D. Vance, and I'm listening to, there are certain cultural things that we have, and yet at the same time we have these outside forces that constantly press in with the kind of brokenness that we see. And the question is, what can we do about it? Well, the only thing we can do is to link the future with all of the great stuff that we've learned from the past. And yet, in our cut flower generation, so many have been cut off from the knowledge of what made this country great in the first place. That's the reason why, before there were education savings accounts or the opportunity to help start schools like this, I worked like the Dickens to found Cheyenne Classical Academy, a Hillsdale College public charter school. I'm still the chairman of it. But this is coming to the end of our first year in Cheyenne. It took me 4 years to get where we are. And the most amazing thing is yesterday, we were the only school in Laramie County to have a Memorial Day celebration. We had a major from the local Air Force base come out. We played taps. We had a band play the military song, and then also all the kids sang a song that's the preamble of the Constitution. It was beautiful. Dressed in their red, white, and blue uniforms. The mascot of our school is the Cheyenne Classical Academy Patriots. And I'm telling you, you just want to love America. being around there. That's how school used to be. How do we replicate that in Thermopolis, Wyoming? To some degree, this is supposed to be one of the reddest of red districts and legislative districts in Wyoming. How could I receive no less than 74% of the vote every time I've ever run here? I'm very conservative. And it's because there are a lot of conservative people that are looking for someone to articulate it. But as we go generation to generation to generation, there are so many kids who have been taught nonsense. I'm just going to talk. Is that all right? Y'all can. So I've given this talk all over the country now, and it's on the history of education in America. And what I do is I really show a massive inflection point about 1905, and it's the publication of a booklet by John Dewey called A Common Faith. And in A Common Faith, what he does is he says this, he says, there is no God, there is no soul. Therefore, there is no reason to teach ethics. And he goes down this long list, and you can see the long-term effect. All that to say, we have to focus on public education because 95.1% of our students are locked into public education. There's not enough schools to counterbalance that. And yet at the same time, we have to bring up an alternative. And that's what you guys are here for today. To do what, so I held the very first phone call on education savings accounts. It was kind of at the height of COVID, so it was a Zoom call with folk around the state and a group called EdChoice, which used to be known as the Milton Friedman Foundation, and then Yes Every Kid. And so I held this Zoom call with public policy experts in Wyoming and then across the nation to try to lay out a vision for what could happen. And it took a lot of work. But this last year, we now have the opportunity for schools like yours to become an education service provider. It's not all rolling out easy, but that's because it's a major program. And so, but there's a lot of good happening, and that's what we're looking forward to. So that's kind of just giving a background, and honestly, I could talk a long time, so y'all need to just stop me, and someone needs to ask a question, all right? But do y'all have questions that on education savings accounts, education service providers, maybe home-based education savings accounts? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm wondering how homeschool...
Remind me of your name again.
Kelsey Galovich.
Good to see you, Kelsey.
Good to
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah, please.
How can homeschool families utilize the program?
So if you go to that's a great question. The question was, how can homeschool families take part of this? Homeschool families, and this is a terminology use I want to make sure that we are aware of. Homeschool families and home-based education savings account families are two different things. That was carefully designed. If a person does not want to take part of the ESA program and just wants to homeschool the same way they've always done, they still can do that. That was a careful thing that I fought for every step of the way because we don't want to lose ground trying to gain ground. And so the classic homeschool family still operates under the homeschool code in Title 21. I forget which article it is. But under Title 21, Article 9, which is the education savings account, this actually opens the door for home-based education savings accounts. And so what you have to do is, much like a school would, you'll become your own education service provider. And that's so that you can let people know, that you actually taught the child what's necessary: math, English, science, social studies, studies of the U.S. and Wyoming Constitution. So you fill that out. Then you also, it sounds redundant, but it's the only way we know how to do it this first year. You become an ESP, education service provider, and then you apply for an ESA. And so in filling that out, then you can actually demonstrate that you're paying for your child not to go to Disneyland, but to purchase curricula. And so that's how that works. But it's all right there. There are videos, tutorials right on the Wyoming Department of Education webpage that'll show you how to do it. And so already several people I know of have called and said, I did it. It's painful. It's painful. Yeah, it's government. Yeah, I know. But anyway, yeah, so it works. It works that way. Yeah, but it's all right there. It doesn't cost you anything to do it. You may have to wait a little while to get the answer back. Some people got it back pretty quickly. So, but yeah. Other questions?
So we get $7,000, correct?
You get up to $7,000. Yeah, you won't get a blank check.
No, I
But
mean,
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I just wanted to.
what happens to the other 10 that's already set aside for that kid? Because it's $17,000 for every kid that goes into the public school system. What happens to that other 10?
Do y'all mind if I go on like a 3-minute rant here?
You need more water?
Do y'all know it doesn't take $17,000 to educate a child? What happens is, and I don't know if I came up with the term, I just know I love using it because it reminds me of the minerals industry. We have all of this administrative overburden that has crept up since 1993 or so. And let me tell you where that comes from. I almost so on a rant. I'm so sorry. Sometimes I say that inside stuff outside. So Brian, just stop me, brother. But the last month of Jimmy Carter's presidency, they developed the National Department of Education. I've walked by that building, and you walk by it forever. On the way, if you're walking from the Holiday Inn to the Capitol building, it's it's unbelievable. And you'll see lights on late at night and everything else, and they literally are just shuffling papers from here to there. It reminds me of some of the books you introduced me to, Charles, in science fiction from Heinlein. Is just mindless robots doing stuff that really is just horrible. But when I look at what's happened, they kept it somewhat at bay under President Reagan. He actually hired a really good man, William J. Bennett, to lead the program for about 8 years. And then under George H.W. Bush, it just kind of continued the Reagan tendency. But under Clinton, since about 1993-94 till now, we've seen a massive shift in public education. Our education numbers continue to slide. And when you look at the NTSS scores, the United States of America continues to slide down the list as far as our education I'm so on a rant. We continue to slide. And we have to ask, why, after dumping this amount of money into education, are we continuing to suffer? And it's because of the administrative overburden. And so when you look at how much money it costs, it's really a money racket. And so here's what, when you look at the $17,000, and you look at the continuing increase in what the Wyoming Education Association is calling for public school education in this state, the only way to save Wyoming's budget is to actually get kids good education taught by people who actually love them and who can do it better, faster, and cheaper. This is what we call modernity. It's amazing. Modernity is achieved by going backwards, not forwards. And so, I don't know. The other $10,000 does not, it basically does not have to be paid out, doled out to people who have been abusing the system.
Away
Yeah, it stays in the system. Yeah, it stays.
in the general fund where
Yeah, it stays. Yeah. Yeah, it's not spent. Yeah. I'm sorry, that was a long answer to a short question, but I get a little fired up. Yeah. All right, next question. Just snap out of it.
Can the funds be utilized for things such as like sports and music lessons and things like that?
Well, the fun thing about sports and such is if you already have children who play sports at the local school, is that what you're talking about?
No, more like we go to a wrestling club and that costs money, and
Yeah.
we have a dance studio here that children go to.
Yeah. Well, if you look, was that?
Field trips and things like that.
Right.
You're right. So we had to be very careful with how it could be spent. And so if you look at Article 9, here's what it could be spent on, okay? Tuition and fees at a qualified school, tutoring services provided by an individual or tutoring facility. The tutoring services shall not be provided by an ESA student's immediate family. Services contracted for and provided by a public school district, including any services provided by a public charter school. So we at Shine Classical Academy are actually trying to help homeschoolers in this, and in local Christian schools. Services under this subparagraph may include, without limitation, individual classes and extracurricular activities and programs. And then what this means, we look at school uniforms, educational software, computer hardware, textbooks, curriculum, fees for nationally standardized assessments, tuition and fees for summer education programs and specialized after-school education programs, but not including after-school childcare programs. Tuition fees, instructional materials, and exam fees at a career or technical school. Education services and therapies, and there's a long list there. Tuition and fees at an institution of higher education. Fees for transportation paid to a fee-for-service transportation provider. And any other educational expense approved by the state superintendent. So when it comes to sports and some of those things, only to a limited degree. Now, when you talk about martial arts, I don't know. This is where, and I typed this question down because it's been asked. This is why I love being in Thermopolis. It's already been asked because martial arts actually are quite educational in a way that's different than even football or something like that. I think it's different, but we'll have to ask that question on like a wrestling club, because I think it might actually be, my gut feeling is it's outside the bounds of the ESA. So, yeah.
So what if the wrestling club decided to be an ESA vendor? I mean, that would they would have to go through the vetting process to be a vendor.
The ESP, become an ESP.
Now, the ESP, this is where it might come into a bit of a challenge, unless it was attached to like a local school or something. The ESP has to be able to demonstrate to the Wyoming Department of Education that they teach reading, writing, mathematics, civics, studies of the U.S. Constitution and Constitution of the state of Wyoming, history, literature, and science. And so an ESP has to fit a certain educational standard. And so that's where I'm not exactly sure how it will work.
So
But
what
the
I
question
see-
is whether if it were attached to a school that offers these.
So
you know.
I see that. So when you are homeschooled, you have to pay a fee to become part of the team.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that your ASA will cover that
Yeah.
as an extracurricular.
Well, see, and that's the question. If it's charged to any other family that goes to the public school, it probably will be assessed in the same way. You know, if they have to pay $100 fee, and they're just a public school kid going to a public school, you're probably going to be charged the same amount. So that's where, yeah, I don't know that fee would go away if it isn't. If it
So
is
public
there.
school. This is just for now because I had to do this for my son. Is I had to pay $100 fee because we took him out of the public school, so we had to pay a fee to HSAA, and then another $5 per sport that he's in. So the way I understand and I've read is that fee would be covered by the ESA.
Only if the district became an ESP.
Yeah.
They
This,
have to become an education service provider.
right.
Which WHSAA is who you're paying into, so I think they are becoming,
They're becoming,
I'm pretty sure they're gonna be an
Okay.
ESP.
So yeah, that's correct. So
I
yeah,
think,
that's
I think
my-
we'll find out a lot of what's gonna be provided when we get into the drop down menu.
So, Kelsey, the
Parents
dance.
Look down and see, okay.
The
who are
dance
service
test would have to
providers?
be
Whether
an
they-
ESP,
whether
but she'd have to do all the math,
and
science,
that'll probably
and
answer a lot
stuff.
of those questions right there, whether
That's
the
right.
WHSA is one of them or not,
right.
you know,
That's right.
which would be awesome if they did.
That brings another question, is anybody going to produce a directory of the ESPs?
Absolutely.
Well, so yeah, that will actually be there right on the Wyoming Department of Education. And actually, you can look up your. It's like applying for a FAFSA. You know, you can find your school, and then you fill everything out for that school right there on a website. So they'll show up right there. Yeah. So, yeah. You got that look on your face
so
like.
I heard or was told that like religious curriculum will not be reimbursed. Is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate.
Okay, because I was thinking that kind of defeats the whole school choice thing. So
You're absolutely right. This is a clause here. No parent shall be required to include any instruction that conflicts with the parent or ESA students' religious doctrines. But in the course of in the flow of the conversation, the whole point was, like, for instance, my children were using a Becca book curricula for to homeschool them, and scripture is baked into it. It's just used as a lot like McGuffey's readers were many years ago. It's used. It incorporates a lot of truth and a lot of history right out of the scripture, and they cannot tell you that you cannot use that curriculum, and so that's a very important thing that we fought a lot to make sure of, in spite of the fact that there is a senator by the name of Cale Case who argued vehemently. He's from Lander. If you have anybody in Lander you know, tell them please run for the state senate there and help us out a whole lot in Cheyenne. But no, that was a big point of contention, and that was something we fought hard over. So it's a great question though, because it's right at the nub of what we're getting at. Do we enforce rigid secularism in education in America, a la John Dewey? Or do we have the opportunity to return to what actually made America great at the very beginning? So I like that question. Yeah, I'm editorializing as I go. Yeah.
But as long as a person meets those curriculum standards, that they're looking for you to those basic traditional standards, can't you do anything else you want to do for your children?
You mean as far as educating them? Yeah, with other extra curriculum, I suppose.
Subjects.
Yeah, yes, yeah,
As
you
long
can.
as you're just meeting those basic standards, you can.
Yeah.
There's nothing restricting.
There's
what
nothing
you can do
restricting.
or whatever.
Right, exactly. When people have tried to bring this argument up, they appeal to the Wyoming Constitution as something known as the Blaine Amendment. And the fun thing is, 3 separate Supreme Court cases at the U.S. Supreme Court have eviscerated the Blaine Amendment in this regards. And so anything that's offered to anyone else, you cannot attack religious education if something's been offered to the rest of the populace. You cannot exclude it because it's religious. And so that's what they've done through a case out of Missouri, Maine, in Montana, and then there's another one. There was a little bit of a setback yesterday in a 4-4 split at the U.S. Supreme Court, where there was a charter school out of Oklahoma that wanted to be specifically a Catholic charter school. Justice Amy Coney Barrett recused herself because she's very closely involved with a Catholic charter school. And sadly, it came down to a 4-4 split. But that really doesn't affect any other case that has determined the Blaine Amendment, that's where the Blaine Amendment's been touched. So I think I may have rambled there a little bit, but yeah, Charles.
What's the Blaine Amendment? No teaching?
Forgive me, yeah. I'll give you the full dose. In 1876, James G. Blaine was trying to specifically attack Catholic schools. And what he did is he said that he tried to pass a U.S. Amendment to the Constitution and came within 2 votes in the Senate of getting it through. And what it said is that there would be no sectarian education taught. What he meant by that is no religious education. So it failed at the federal level, but a lot of Western constitutions had it baked in at the very beginning, and then many other states passed a Blaine Amendment or some version of it, so that it was like 40 states, a little over 40 states, that wound up with a version of the Blaine Amendment. And the whole point was they didn't want to have Catholic education. What they managed to do, 5 generations later, is ensure that the only religion that could be taught in public education was a forced secularism. And which, as you can see, leaves you in a position where, boys can become girls and girls can be boys and all those other things. And so the Blaine Amendment has been shot down now 3 times. And so that is the long answer to a short question. I have a tendency to do that. Sorry, brother. I saw your hand up.
Do you know how to?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Let me just.
It's fun watching your face turn slightly different shades of pink. This is great. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I'll ask another question, I'm
Oh.
not shy.
Sure.
I've heard the term vendor and the term ESP, are they different entities?
No, I'm using them interchangeably. Yeah. So. That was a short answer.
Congratulations.
I'm on a roll right here. Yeah.
Since the kids are required to take the state testing, is there any sort of like penalty if they don't score like what the average?
No, and that's a very good question. They don't have to take the YTOP. They can,
Okay.
but they can take, in the term we used, a term of art I found several years ago that we got into the legislation was any nationally normed achievement exam. Most Christian schools I know of, including this one, found out a few minutes ago, use the Iowa assessment, which functions really well. So whatever you score on that, though, it doesn't determine whether or not you'll receive funding the following year. Is something just so that statistics can be compiled. It was giving a little bit to the Education Association so that they want to see private and Christian schools fail. They really do. I think what they're going to see, though, is that they're going to be really hard pressed to match the standards that are met by education that actually educates. It's going to be fun.
Well, and that is one of our goals, and so work like that is useful to help us know where we're at and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And a genuine reading, writing, math, science, we want to teach those kids those things for real.
Right.
And not just say that we are.
That's right.
And so a standardized test is a good tool to try to be able to figure that out.
Right.
And then we go, okay, teachers, here's what we can do better.
Mhm.
Here's where we have failed these kids. Here's where we've succeeded in. And so I like that. I'm not into the why top do we Duke and all that stuff,
Right.
but I do appreciate a good test that
Right.
shows us what we're doing.
The fun thing is, there was a strong effort by some to take out this nationally, a test like this. It was Christian schools who kept reaching out to say, no, we don't mind taking a test. We already do that.
Yeah.
And that's for our benefit and everything else. And we have nothing to hide. As a matter of fact, I think what's going to happen is people are going to find out those guys are really good. Maybe they shouldn't have to report anymore. So we're looking forward to what those tests will reveal. So I think it'll turn out really good. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, does that help answer your question?
Mhm.
Great.
So does that, so a person only has like a couple of options for themselves? I mean, so for people providing other kinds of services, for instance, like tutoring, like, or whatever, like, is that different for those kind of providers and other kinds of providers? Like a Christian school would have different standards and criteria that they would have to meet? Like, how does that work?
No, I don't think they have any difference in the criteria or the standards. And they will be funded through this. I think they're going to have to meet, if you have a child who has, say, a speech pathology, you're going to have a speech pathologist teach them and that sort of thing. So those standards are not going to change. But the cost of that can be covered now
I see.
through the ESA.
And so we've established our tuition based off of giving room for money to be left for speech or for other special services that might be needed, so that our tuition is not taking every bit of that 7,000, but it's still taking it to where we can pay a teacher. We still can't do what the district can, but maybe we can pay a teacher a little bit more than the peanuts and pennies that we give them, and maybe step forward with having a teacher that's a little bit more committed and capable and trained and everything like that. And at the same time, take care of speech stuff, because we've had the CRC here helping with some of our kids, which is awesome. They're super helpful. They need it. But I know that is going to change this coming year, and whether the CRC becomes a ESP or not is up to them. But hopefully, we can find some sort of service for our kids that need it. You know, because like I just think of Link. You know, he really benefited from this and no longer.
My
needs it.
daughter, when
Yeah.
she went to this school,
Yep,
had a speech pathologist that would come down and work with her here in this building.
yeah, and we have a young man, KJ, who is gonna continue to go here, but he, you know, needs some sort of IEP for a learning disability that he has, and so we're gonna continue to work with the district and other entities in town the best we can, but also, again, leaving latitude for them to become ESPs, and, you know, but yeah, I think a lot of things are gonna be kind of dynamic and changing as we go. So I don't know if that helps out.
Yep.
Talking about IEPs and everything.
Yeah.
I did talk to the state's, special ed director who was actually in our building the other day. And he did say that this takes IDA out of the question. You can't use federal money anymore to provide services. Once you accept that ESA, your rights to IDA go away. So that's,
I'm gonna write that down and just point that up, bring that up.
And so, like, currently, you guys do homeschooling. So, do you have any, cause the people that I know have done homeschooling, once they chose that for themselves and operated, according to their own curriculum or whatever, was there any requirement for test taking or anything? Is that something that's gonna change for you only if you try to tap into the money? Is that?
Yeah, Wyoming doesn't require state testing.
Yeah. So
But
now, if
now
you're
you will.
gonna tap into that $7,000 thing or whatever, you're gonna have to
Right.
put some kind of standard for that.
So do you have to report that or just keep it on record?
No, you just have to put it. I'm not sure exactly how it'll look on the reporting tool that the WDE comes up with, but I think basically what you're doing is you're just showing that you took a standardized test.
Right.
You may have to do some reporting on how your children did on it, but that's not going to determine whether or not you get to
Right.
access the ESA program.
But you might actually have to report it to the state instead of just keep it on file.
And that's where I don't know the answer to that one just yet.
I'm sure they'll want to see data.
Right.
I mean, that's what drives everybody, right? Is data.
Right.
For
Right.
all of the ESPs, from what I've gone through and reading every bit of it, is they will have to go under some sort of audit. And to get to be approved, so you have this initial approval phase of being an ESP, then you go through the audit. And then there's a yearly type of audit that is going to happen if they want it to. So there's one mandatory audit, and then after that, and you're recognized as an ESP, then they can come in whenever they want and say, I wanna look at the book.
See what you're spending and all that stuff.
Right.
But regarding the testing, I know that was the nature of the
And that's
question.
part of it
that
as
would be
well.
part of the audit.
Making sure it's not just the financial audit that they're looking for, it's, are you teaching these things?
Right.
And so as far as I could read, that's part of the audit.
Yeah.
That's part of them coming in
Right.
and making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. So that you're not taking your $7,000, going to Disneyland and teaching your kids how to make pipe bombs in the back room while doing target practice most of the day.
Man.
That's great chemistry, man.
Pipe bombs could be useful.
Yeah, they're so fun. I love using them up, man.
Is the recording on?
So good.
Who's recording? Yes,
I miss y'all. I just gotta say this. Y'all are so fun.
So will you test annually? Will you have to test annually?
Yes.
Like you would, like in school, if we're like a fourth grade or something. But how does that work, like as a homeschool person, like currently? Like, you don't have to do that, but if your child wants to go to college or something, do you have to take an ACT? Or something like that, like that kind of standardized?
That's something different. That's something different.
Yeah.
So if you want to be, again, a home-based ESA recipient, you're going to have to take something like the Iowa, which,
I see.
by the way, you can pay for using these funds. This testing is already right in there. But secondly, then most of that is done online, and so your mom, goes and signs in and everything, pays the fee, which she then can get reimbursed for. And the child sits down and fills out the Iowa assessment.
Sure.
And so, and then you just show that you did that. Now the ACT, SAT, or what I'm fighting for really hard now, called the Classical Learning Test, the CLT, that's something different. And normally it is a university is asking you to show what your scores are. And so that testing, which is often done at a local high school, can still be paid for using these funds. But it's different than the annual assessment that you take in 4th, 5th, 6th, all that.
So what about ACT work keys? Like, can that be paid for?
Yeah,
Through, so you can
that's right.
run all of these tests?
Yeah. When you read through Title IX, you even see it right in there.
Well, some of that, because most people will probably, the average person will probably use like online stuff, any of that. That is your gonna be your measure or whatever.
So what the statute says under subsection H of Romanet I, fees for nationally standardized assessments, advanced placement examinations, examinations related to college or university admission, and tuition and fees for preparatory courses for the exams. So all of that, I think, is pretty much encompassed in the language. Yeah.
And
Come
I
on.
think you're right. Like, we're just gonna have to see how that goes.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
can kind of have that whole adjustment thing and sort that out. I appreciate tonight the opportunity to come and, we'll all be sorting out whatever that looks like to use that
Yeah.
for our best.
Anytime you
options.
stand up a new program, so I can tell you what the ideal is. I'm going to sound like Plato here. The ideal form. But often, as you come on down the line, you start to see that, this is not ideal, the way it's going. And it's because of how it then comes through the software program, or how it's interpreted by this or something. But I know what the ideal is and what we're fighting for. And so we're going to try to make sure those two things agree with one another. And we're going to run into bumps here. And that's because it's the very first year. And so that's where, when you guys tell me what's going on, and I'm able to relay that back to a team of people who've been working on this now, coalition, for several years, then we can start to iron out those bumps. So, yeah.
But you can use part of that money for specialized services or whatever as you would see fit for that individual that was gonna access through you or whatever, and how you were gonna take a look at that individually to make sure. They'll just wanna see, say in a school setting like you have here,
Yeah.
you would manage that just as you need it for services. How are you gonna set that up on your?
So basically, the parent is going to assess that with the teachers, and so the teachers will come in and be like, hey, little Johnny here needs speech.
Sure.
Okay, let's go and see what CRC or see what speech therapy, Anonymous will provide. Oh, look, here's a service provider here, and we're gonna let them know, we're gonna communicate to them, we'll be a part of that whole process. And then the money never goes directly to the parent, the money will go to the service provider.
Sure.
And so with us, one of the things that I would like to see in the future is we've always had a hard time trying to figure out how to work the finances of running a school and work with, at the same time, homeschooling parents. Because there just seems to be a real hard divide there where you've got these families paying, and then you've got these families coming in and they're not, and then you see the same thing between the school district. I think this is gonna help smooth a lot of that out between homeschooling in school district and Christian schooling in school district. I think it actually will become a thing that helps the money to be accountably ran and not just kind of like, okay, where's or is that other $10,000 or whatever? We're not just wasting money to keep lights on or do something like that. It'll be itemized to a degree that, you know, if Bobby needs tutoring, because we cannot provide, but there's an ESP over here that can provide tutoring, you know, Wade's Mathaholics Anonymous, and, you know, he charges $47 for a week of tutoring, and so we go in and, you know, we put that all together, and, you know, we're
Mathaholics
able to do that, and so,
I never had to
I
join
got
that
you.
one.
yeah.
Was it also
I think my mom's in that.
that, savings account for each of those individual families equalizes families?
Yep.
So in other words, that's the cool thing. So everybody pays $300 in tuition or whatever. Everybody does that, and that is money available for people to make their own personal choices about what that's going to look like. So that I see real value for a school like you guys have, because it just, people who would opt out maybe don't have those choices. That's our particular people that we work with really would never get equalized. So that's a cool way. It doesn't sound like very much, and we know.
Right.
So the district takes 17,000, or the state takes off of that the cost of $17,000.
Right.
We're gonna see how that $7,000 is, when you get families equalized, how much better it's gonna be when people can actually access themselves with that $7,000, what they choose to have for themselves.
And I think that's the hope. That's
Yeah,
our
okay.
aim.
Yeah,
Aim.
no,
I agree. There is one potential rub. The local school district could choose to be highly oppositional.
oh, brother.
And Jackson has always been. Yeah, I know. Oh, there are a few, like Goshen County is wanting to work with people. I know up in Newcastle and some of those other,
Yeah.
a lot of rural schools are like, yeah, we'd love to help in every way we can. Jackson is already committed to be as Marxist as possible. And so, yeah, we're gonna find out a lot of details in this state. But that's also where you have the opportunity to find good people to run for school board and change the culture of your local school district. So that can be exciting.
Yeah. It's just cool that everyone else is equalized too.
Yeah.
Like everybody who's already trying to provide those services or is providing those services.
Yeah.
From individual families who have chosen to keep their kids home to just how that whole thing's work. Like, because I feel like probably the worst, the less equal, steady system really is the school district in a lot of ways, because it doesn't really account for how each individual person would best be served individually, kind of, you know what I mean?
They
It
beat
also
the
could-
individuality out of you.
It also could open up some cottage industries, people who have the training and everything else for like audiology, speech pathology, whatever, to finally have enough of a base of people to where they could go out independent, still maintaining credentials and everything else necessary, and alleviate pressure. And this is probably going to happen in larger school districts, but it really could have a wonderful follow-on effect for some of those industries we currently don't have. It could be really good.
Yeah, because if you go to get speech pathology, I mean, you're either tied to a school district or
Yeah.
a university. Or, I don't know many speech pathologists that just operate out of their house.
Yeah, you're right. This could have a really
So
fun economic benefit.
would they? So remember Reagan did jujitsu with us.
Yeah.
So she was a speech pathologist, and she did all of hers online. So could you find a speech pathologist somewhere else, or do they have to be in Wyoming?
It has to be, I would assume they'd have to be a Wyoming service provider.
Right, but they wouldn't have to live here.
They don't. I mean, you could do Zoom, I'm sure.
It's a question I
Get our
don't.
mental health counseling out of Idaho.
Right.
Boy, but I will say that's a question I haven't been asked. But
That's a key.
if it's currently existing in the public school, it's likely that it could go that way too. That's a very interesting question. It could open the door a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could like maybe our organization maybe contract with one of those people, and then, so we hire, like, new niece is a speech pathologist, and she used to do it all online last year. And could we like have hired her to be like our person, and then instead of her having to be an ESP, like we just charge family A an extra $100 or whatever for speech services, and then
Absolutely, because
contract?
when I was just filling out the, we're the learning center, right? And we're trying to become a vendor as well for tutoring services. When I was filling out paperwork, it asked what services do you provide, and speech pathology was on there. So in in your guys' application, you would put we provide these services, and then you just employ that person.
We just hire someone, yeah, you would just,
Like a contractor.
Right.
ultimately, yeah, maybe contract.
Like as a
Yeah.
Right.
contract vendor.
That would make it a lot simpler.
Because as I
for
read
us.
these statutes, that scenario should work. I can't tell you exactly how that reporting will go. I don't know for sure. That's kind of a WDE thing, but the scenario you just outlined, it seems to make sense that that's how that would go.
So,
That would
like
also-
Stephanie with music, if we offered, she's not a employee of the school, but she's kind of a contractor, we could pay her to teach music, or
We paid her a cup of coffee this year.
even like get
And
in
flowers, sorry.
get in the instruments and everything.
Nice.
We should be able to do that.
But does that
Yeah.
person have to have any sort of qualifications?
No. So that's the thing. This does
Right.
not mandate that a teacher of a private school go through the Wyoming Professional Teaching Standards Board. This also something we had legislation on this last year to address, and then I had a long conversation 2 days ago with a guy, Kyle Washut, who's the president of Wyoming Catholic College. There are things we need to address in that Professional Teaching Standards Board. This is why Colorado actually did away with a lot of those teaching standards. Because there was a lady, literally, that was a nationally known art teacher at an Ivy League school who had taught teachers how to teach and had done that for 40 years. She retires, moves to Colorado, wants to work for a really cool charter school there, Liberty Common Charter School. Actually, the one that Hillsdale schools are modeled after. So she's wanting to teach, and she even has taught the teachers how to teach for 40 years. She was going to have to go back to school for 6 months to pass some little dinky test that she probably helped to write in its earliest form 40 years ago. And people started to realize how ludicrous the idea was. Because now you can hire a 22-year-old kid fresh out of college who hasn't actually taught a child yet, except under the supervision of some professor, probably the very professor that we're talking about. And so pretty soon they started to see the silliness of this teaching standard. All it does is well, nobody knows what it is, you know. So there's a point where
It's to protect the incumbents.
that's what it is. Yeah, enforcement.
Because as long as you meet whatever that criteria is gonna be that you're gonna show, like, it shouldn't really matter,
Well, the
especially.
marketplace is competitive, and if we fail to teach our children music,
Right.
and, you know, I'm the music teacher, I'll be like, all right, everybody line up,
Yeah.
la, 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 la. All right,
Triangles.
good job. You guys wanna go out and shoot hoops? Right, you know, your kid doesn't learn how to sing, they know how to shoot hoops.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's obvious, they
Yeah.
go, don't have Brian teach your kids to sing, it's not gonna work out for you.
Yeah, imagine that. This is
Yeah.
why the Milton Friedman Foundation changed its name to Ed Choice. Milton Friedman is all about the market,
Yeah.
competing.
It's
Anyway,
amazing, markets work.
yeah,
So,
man, Adam
another-
Smith was right.
when I see you guys, if you did employ a speech pathologist, that opens up to all the homeschoolers as well, because you're already a
Right.
That's right.
provider that they can hire yours, and it's another revenue stream for.
So that's what I was just thinking. So like with you guys homeschooling, instead of you doing the Ohio testing, Iowa, when we do it,
Yeah, that's what I.
they could come do it,
Take it with us.
and we'd buy the materials, we would pay for the scoring, and then Kelsey's ESA would just come to us for that.
It's, yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, this is a great way to interconnect everybody.
yeah. It really is. You know, that's a really,
I got you.
AI.
Grading sheet.
Lord.
You guys will stop answering.
We're just gonna put a cot over here.
I thought he already moved in. Every time I drive by, he's here. And I drive by a lot.
how's your home life, bro? Just kidding. No,
Well,
don't.
they're all here too.
Oh,
So
I feel like I live at our church. My wife is the church secretary. And that's the weird thing about now buying a headquarters of our own. It's going to be the first time in a long time I've worked away from a family. Anyway, sorry. Sob stories with Nathan. Anyway, y'all have any more questions or anything? This has been fun. Fun.
Thank you, Nathan.
Absolutely. And honestly, most of y'all actually have my number. I normally know if I'm getting one of those fake calls, if it's a 921 number, because most people around here actually have your phone number in my phone. So, yeah, feel free to call me. And it's been getting really busy. So, yeah, make sure you, if you don't mind, that you have a good question. But please call me. I would love that. And but yeah, I want this school to succeed, and I think you guys have the opportunity. It's part of the reason why I've been fighting on this now for 5 years, and is through a lot of learned experiences of my 3 children in this school and my wife teaching here. And I'm pulling for you, and we need you here. So y'all have a lot of work, and this is just a excursus. It's not a rabbit trail. Y'all have a lot of work here in Thermopolis. I really want you to be better represented by your senator. I'll say that. And I really would love it if you guys could begin to build. One of my 5 other things is Wyoming's non-governmental civic life. Edmund Burke is the one that pointed this out. The reason government gets so bloated is because we end our relationships with one another. And what a good school can provide is relationship far beyond just the education of children. It becomes a place that's the central hub. When you look at the largest employer in this community, it's your school. That also means that if you happen to hire a radical left-wing individual as your superintendent who basically gives only the information out that he wants you to hear, which happens in some boards, that means that the heartbeat of your community doesn't actually go along with the community itself. Forgive me if I'm going to be very transparent, because I would love to say it even if you were standing right here next to me, because y'all need help. Y'all need help. And for a community this great, it's hard sometimes to step back and look at a group of people you love so much and think, oh, how could we reach in and fix that? And so that's why, ever since I've left you, I've been fighting tooth and nail as we found Wyoming Family Alliance and fighting for ESAs and Shine Classical Academy, why I went back to college, and why all these other things are going on. It's because I want to see places like this thrive. But that's why I pray for you so much. I want you to thrive. I want it to go well. So anything I can do to help, please call. I want to help. So thanks.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, guys.